I've got a question for you. Obviously you can't answer me, you're on the other end of some internet-enabled device passively watching as I ramble on about my experiences with classic games I grew up with. But for the sake of this rhetorical query, please indulge me for just a moment. When you hear this sound, Sega, what do you think of? If your answer is a speedy blue spiked creature with red trainers and a bit of an attitude, then congratulations, you've passed this test. If you thought of something else, that's okay too. Why not let me know in the comments? Sonic the Hedgehog. You might have heard of him. Birthed by Yuji Naka and Naoto Oshima, Sonic sprinted onto the scene in Sega's attempt to craft their own mascot. Back then, most gaming companies and systems had a mascot, the character who'd feature in multiple games to reinforce some sense of brand identity. Nintendo had their plumber turned mushroom forager, Super Mario. The ZX Spectrum had whatever the hell Horace was. He sure enjoyed skiing. But now it was the start of the 1990s, and times had changed drastically. Drum and bass club bangers shifted the new romantics off the radio, as fashion and the vibe in general started to embrace a new kind of cool. Skater culture in the US began to rise in prominence. The Berlin Wall fell. It was radical. It was bodacious. It was the start of the Attitude Era. No, I'm not talking about that Attitude Era. Sonic was created at the perfect time. A fast, cool, stylish icon with an attitude at the exact moment when having a healthy dose of snark really mattered. Unlike Mario, who plodded along stomping on fungi and punching brickwork like he's had one too many Stellas on a Saturday night. Sonic the Hedgehog felt like a whole different beast. The kind of person to run past you in the street not giving a shit about you or anyone else. The type of guy who would answer, whatever, if asked to do chores. The kid who'd laugh and call you a wanker if you asked them politely to keep the noise down. Sonic the Hedgehog was the cool kid on the block. He had the style, the moves, was impatient and just had to go fast, whatever the cost. It's no surprise that other cool characters came around about that time. Bart Simpson was giving his teachers and local pub landlords shit, while the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were skating about, munching pizza and shouting bizarre phrases like cowabunga. I still don't know what that means. So, Sonic was born, and the gaming landscape changed. Anthropomorphic animal protagonists with an attitude became a staple of the decade. Aero the Acrobat, Sparkster the Possum, Bubsy the all following the blueprint Sonic left behind as he sped towards self-destruction. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. For now, let me tell you a little story. It was Christmas Eve 1991, and I was engrossed in the typical festive television specials of the era. I always knew what I was going to get for Christmas, usually choosing the presents myself. This year I knew I had a Sega Mega Drive. The excitement was insane. My first proper console, Sonic the Hedgehog bundled inside. I decided to ask if I could try it, cheekily, just in case it didn't work. My mum agreed, and my uncle set up the system. I was shaking with anticipation, desperate for the promised blast processing gubbins to engulf me. The console was plugged in, my uncle inserted the game and switched it on. Nothing. Just a black screen. We switched it off and on again a few more times. The system was dead. Well, that was an insane coincidence. After a brief bit of panic, somehow they repackaged the system and took it back to the local Woolworths for a replacement. Remember Woolworths? On Christmas Eve. Must have been rammed full of the last minute stragglers. Yet somehow they returned with a brand new boxed console half an hour later and set this one up. Switching it on, again, the same issue. A dead black screen of nothing. It was at this point I tried to look for a solution myself. Removing the cartridge was a bit too easy. It just slid out. Putting it back in made a k-clunk sound, which my mum and uncle thought sounded like I'd broken something inside. Turns out this was the issue. they'd loosely placed the cartridge in the slot without actually pressing it down into the connectors. There it was, the bit-crushed, heavily compressed Sega chant blaring into my ears, followed by Sonic the Hedgehog himself, leaning out of the screen, wagging his finger at us like we were stupid. They were stupid, but I was giddy with joy, running through the luscious Green Hill Zone, smashing Robotnik's metal minions. Not wanting to spoil Christmas by completing it in one sitting, getting to Marble Zone was enough. The console was repackaged, wrapped and placed under the tree, until about 5 AM anyway, when I woke up before anyone else, tore through the decorative wrapper and set the system back up. Sonic waits for no one. The evil Dr. Robotnik's modus operandi is to use the power of the Chaos Emeralds to turn all the cute little animals into robotic tools of destruction, slaves to create some sort of mechanical utopia. Joseph Engelberg will be turning in his grave. Sonic takes offence at this extreme industrialisation, possibly because despite all the cool kid posturing, he secretly subscribes to the Greenpeace newsletter. Destroying each of Robotnik's aptly named badniks will release the fluffy captive inside. Larger cells full of animals waiting to be processed can be found after boss encounters. These happen to have a very convenient self-destruct button on top. That's rather thoughtful. Sonic moves fast, as you'd expect, from left to right, defeating foes by jumping on their heads. You can also leverage Sonic's speed to curl into a spiked ball mid-run that tears through enemies and obstacles alike. You'd best collect those gold rings laying about. Without at least one of them, you'll be brown bread at the mere touch of a mini-mech or craftily placed spike bit. Power-ups are stored in period-appropriate TV sets for some reason, and range from ring bundles to one-hit shields, extra speed and brief invincibility. Extra lives can be found inside these teleboxes too, though collecting 100 rings will also afford you that luxury. Holding 50 or more rings at the end of an act will reveal a giant golden ring. Jumping into this will award a chance to visit a psychedelic, eternally spinning maze, where you have the chance to obtain one of the 6 Chaos Emeralds. I always found these rather annoying, at the mercy of the game's idea of physics. Collecting all 6 emeralds will give you the best ending, but otherwise have no real benefits, unlike later games in the series. The stage design slowly shifts from natural green areas to industrial zones of steel and cogs as you get closer to Robotnik's base. From the iconic Green Hill Zone, through casino-based lands, via a horribly slow-paced underwater labyrinth. I doubt there'll be a more iconic first boss in gaming than Robotnik and his swinging sphere of death. Sega themselves probably agree, seeing as this boss fight has been replicated and remixed in many later Sonic games. Robotnik pops up at the end of every third act in a new contraption, all of which suffer the same significant design flaw, always a weak spot to jump on. Will he ever learn? The Labyrinth Zone doesn't have a boss. Robotnik just flies away cowardly while hoping the rising waters finish you off instead. In my case, they often do. I know literally everyone already says it, but it's 100% true. Sonic's drowning timer music is pure, undiluted anxiety, waiting, nay, praying that an air bubble appears as the tempo and your blood pressure increase in tandem. If I heard this in real life, I know for a fact I'd genuinely shit myself. Cursing me with a lifetime of hating water levels and games aside, Sonic has a fantastic soundtrack. So many memorable ditties in the first few games in the series have a rent-free permanent residence in my head. No one can forget the enthusiasm and vibrancy of Green Hill Zone. Or that Marble Zone sounds like a slower version of Andy Williams' track Music to Watch Girls By.
The boys watch the girls while the girls watch the boys who watch the girls go by.
Speaking of slower music, being a Brit often has its fair share of issues. In this case, our problem was the PAL video format. I remember buying Sonic again when it came out on the Xbox 360's downloadable arcade, wanting a hit of nostalgia. Instead, something was wrong. Very wrong. The game and music were playing a bit too fast. The boss music at the end of Green Hill in particular threw me off. I was confused. Had I misremembered a key part of my childhood? Well, not exactly. At that point I turned to the internet hive mind and discovered that PAL games that were poorly optimised, aka most of them, ran at an astonishingly terrible 17% slower than the same game running on NTSC hardware. 17%! The Xbox port obviously ran on a superior NTSC code, confirming my childhood was actually even shitter than I'd thought. However, I will have the last laugh this time. US gamers never got a chance to listen to this absolute banger that I feel benefits from the slower speed. For some reason I also made up lyrics for it because I was 6. Sonic has since had a mixed legacy. The games up to Sonic and Knuckles are absolute classics without a doubt, as is Sonic Mania, a refreshing modern spin on the 2D era, and I'd go as far as to call it the true Sonic 4. Actual Sonic 4, on the other hand, just felt like a cheap rehash of greatest hits, held together by an engine where jumping physics felt a bit off. I can't really comment on the multiple 3D Sonic games as I haven't ever really felt the need to play them. Most of them appear to have had quite a negative reception though, and as for Sonic 06, yeah, that can just get in the bin. Rerez did a fantastic 3-hour-long video discussing the tragedy of that game. I highly suggest you watch it.
But see, here's that loop-bounding, road-shredding Sonic gameplay we've come to expect. And then we snap back to reality.
As for Sonic himself, I doubt he'll be going away anytime soon. Despite the Attitude Era of the 90s being a long-forgotten fad, the Blue Hedgehog continues to persist. 3 huge box office movies have refueled his momentum towards some form of unlikely career resurgence. But will he ever have another cracking 2D game in the vein of Sonic Mania? Or an actually good transition to 3D? I live in hope. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm just going to go for a spin to grab some rings.